Hi, everyone. He means what he says, and he isn't playing around. No, I'm not talking about any mortal man who anyway needs to fulfill his words based on the principle of motzos vasecha tishmar ve'asisa, that one needs to fulfill the words that come out of his mouth. Rather, I'm referring to Hashem. If it wasn't clear prior to Parshas Bo, it's abundantly clear that when he speaks, he isn't playing games. Did you notice? Early in the Parsha, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu that he would commence with the final Makkah at Chatzos, precisely at midnight. However, feeling nervous that Paro's clock might be off, Moshe Rabbeinu told him that Hashem would come at approximately midnight. Chachatzos halayla. Hashem was having none of the games. We read later on in the Parsha, Vayhi bachatzi halayla. When it was exactly midnight, then the Makkah started. There were no games. When the exact moment of the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim was upon us, as we also read in the Parsha, again, Hashem did not play games. We're told that the Yetziah happened at the exact precise time. Vayhi be'etzem hayom. It was precisely the moment that Avram and Yitzchak were informed. Yes, again, no games. In fact, Hashem did not allow the Jews any time to bake matzos for their little excursion out of Mitzrayim. We're told that the reason we eat matzah on Pesach, Higorishumi Mitzrayim v'lo yachlu lehismameya, because our ancestors were chased out of Mitzrayim and could not be delayed, was because Hashem doesn't dilly-dally. He's not playing games. So Hashem isn't supposed to play, I get it. It's quite evident in the Parsha, but is it really true? Just earlier today on Rosh Chodesh, we read that Hashem does play. David HaMelech notes that he created a sea creature, the Leviathan Zeh Yatzarta, the Leviathan that he created, L'sachik bo, just to play with it. Now, if Hashem doesn't play around, why does he do so with the Leviathan? And let me add, in the very Parsha that repeatedly reminds us that Hashem means business and is not playing around, he tells Moshe that he actually does play. Indeed, the Parsha begins with Moshe receiving the command to Boel Paro, to come to Paro, despite the fact that Paro wasn't going to listen. Why? Because there was a deeper purpose, as the Torah. Leman tisaper ba'oznei bincho ven bincha is asher salalti b'Mitzrayim, so that Bnei Yisrael would be able to tell their children and grandchildren about how Hashem played with the Egyptians. So now Hashem does play, and not only with fish, but with people too. What's up with that? Moreover, when the Gemara tells us about how Hashem played with the Leviathan every day, it notes that he did so until the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. However, today, he uses that very time, the time he used to play, to teach children. What's he teaching them? What's the connection to the playing and the fish? One of the more interesting and wise personalities I've gotten to know in the last 20 years is a retired school teacher, Mr. Joel Glazer, a historian, but also a legendary pedagogue. He knows how to bring history to life, together with his practical lessons that he learned from history. His students have even dedicated Facebook pages to their shared experiences of close to 50 years as students. And he has compiled many of the life lessons that happened in his classroom. One of the memories that his students remember well is playing that game he called diplomacy, to learn how to function in the world at large. I'm not so sure they remember who won, but the rules of the game of diplomacy, they all, in all their generations, seem to recall. Rabbi Lamb used to remind us that games have rules, and despite them, the winners still seem surprised when their sacrifices prove to be worthwhile. Losers, he would tell us, think that they are about to win until a victory gets snatched from them in a final moment. He would often add that world leaders, going back to Paro, would repeat this lesson many, many times. You see, according to Rabbi Lamb, Paro was a whiz at the game of diplomacy. He had bested every other government in the world. He had brought the wealthy and the powerful family of Yaakov down to Mitzrayim and enslaved the entire group, taking their fortunes and bringing their prosperous lives to a grinding halt in slavery. It seems that Paro, was sitting pretty on the top of the world. But as good as he thought he was, Paro forgot to include one factor in his game playing. He forgot to include Hashem. In fact, he denied that Hashem was a factor to be contended with at all. He bet against Hashem, and he ultimately lost at the exact time. It was as if he thought he had cornered the world and was able to win, and suddenly found out that his own moves brought him into a checkmate. Some might say it was the luck of the game, but in truth, it was Hashem's plan all along. Maybe that was part of Hashem's message to Bnei Israel at the beginning of the Parsha. Indeed, the Chasam Sofer notes that from the moment that Yosef was released from prison, actually from the moment that Paro had dreams about the cows and the ears of corn or wheat, Hashem was already playing with him to make sure that the lessons of history would be fulfilled in Jewish destiny, as the Jews would leave Mitzrayim precisely at the ordained time, but B'Rechush Gadol, with the great wealth already previously promised to Avram Avinu. That last Leviathan birth, it was at the time of creation. And I believe perhaps the idea of Hashem playing with it is a reminder that Hashem plays with the games of history and has been doing so since the beginning of time itself. Even in the times when his worldview doesn't follow his plans openly, as when our people didn't deserve to remain in the land and had to be exiled, Hashem still controls the game. He may stop his playing with the Leviathan, but the teaching of the children continues. Just as in Mitzrayim, the children and grandchildren saw how Hashem controls destiny from afar, so too he does and always will do, even during long and painful experiences of galus, of exile. Perhaps this is the lesson that he continues to offer the children each and every day during the time he used to play. He tells each generation not to give up, but to look and see that he's still there and is controlling history, just like he always has, and is looking for the precise moment to show us all how it unfolds. We just need to look and be ready to see it and believe. My wife likes to remind me that people who play foolish games win foolish prizes. The games of the pharaohs of history, villains who thought they were the smartest people in the room, ultimately are shamed to discover that they lose in life. The real winners are those like you and me, who calculate and factor Hashem in on our side of the game. We need to make sure, as we're reminded over and over in the Parsha, to make apparent to our children and grandchildren that Hashem works on our side. A wild card, like Hashem's support, changes everything in a moment. And at that moment, there'll be nothing for the villains to do but just go fish. Wishing you and yours a Shabbat Shalom and a Shabbat Shalom to all.